In the past couple of years, it seems as if every single company has changed its branding, packaging, and logo, often for the worse. It's impossible to ignore. In fact, it's so widespread that I'd go so far as to say that it's a cultural phenomenon. So, what's the deal? The first perplexing characteristic about this phenomenon is that the branding is always changed for seemingly no reason, no trigger that warranted the change. Most of the logos didn't look outdated, didn't have a bad design, and really weren't in need of a remodeling. Yet, it happens anyway. This is one of the reasons why this hurricane of a trend is so puzzling and frustrating to so many people. To us, it seems like there's no point for all the change, except, well, change itself. And as creatures of habit, let's just say that many of us don't really jive with that idea. However, as unnecessary as a change may seem to us, nothing happens without a reason. I think that one possible cause of this collective rebranding has to do with the fact that every company wants to follow the trends, to be hip and cool and new. And today, we've decided that the new fresh and hip trend is flat minimalism. My bet is that one company decided to be the first to join the bandwagon, and all the others went along for fear of getting left behind in outdated land. Because dimension, texture, and character is so last decade, am I right? The only other reason I can think of for justifying the great redesign of the 2020s is that perhaps companies think that consumers will start to get bored if they keep the same design around for too long, especially with all of the stark redesigns of other companies going on around them. But so what if companies change their branding unnecessarily? Sure, it might not make sense to us, but it doesn't warrant the amount of backlash and passionate responses that many rebrandings receive. And it's true. If companies all of a sudden started redesigning out of nowhere, but the result was an improvement, then I don't think anyone would care, let alone get mad. The problem is that another peculiar characteristic of this cultural phenomenon is that the logos never really change for the better. It almost seems like every redesign is actually a downgrade. Now, a big part of that perception could be that change, which is something humans don't like, may negatively affect the way we perceive these new designs, almost like a predisposed negative bias towards the new branding, even if it's an improvement. Now, there's definitely an aspect of this psychology involved, but to be honest, even objectively, I think most people can agree that a lot of the rebranding actually is a downgrade. The Pringles logo, the new Google icons, heck, even the Danimals repackaging are all examples of things just getting worse. Speaking of the Danimals packaging, who else remembers these ones from when you were a kid? For me, the old Danimals were something that I distinctly remember from my childhood, drinking them on warm spring days after school, and I vividly remember the amusing packaging. As you can imagine, I was nothing short of devastated when I caught a glimpse of the rebranded Danimals packaging at the supermarket. It was then that I realized that those Danimal drinks, a token of those warm days of my childhood, were a place, a thing that now only existed in my memories. It's not even the physical redesign that bothered me, really. It's the death of what the old Danimals stood for that makes these rebrandings so disturbing to insanely sentimental folk like me. This strong sense of nostalgia, of sentimentality, is something that, believe it or not, can even be associated with something as seemingly ridiculous as packaging. When the appearance, the identity of something so close and familiar to your heart changes into something so foreign, it can not only feel like a betrayal of sorts, but it can even invoke a sense of mourning for days past, and for experiences that no one will ever know again. The hate that so many rebrands receive isn't really the burning rage of angry people, but rather the bitter tears of lost memories and forgotten times. On an even more depressing note, another hallmark reason for why many people seem to respond so poorly to these redesigns is that there's an undeniable feeling of powerlessness that you can't help but feel when confronted by these changes. I'm lucky to live in a world and in a country where most people have a large degree of freedom in their lives, where many things are in our own control. We're so lucky that something as small as a rebrand is the worst thing that happened to us that day. Because in a place where we are so spoiled by freedoms, where we so take for granted the control we have over our own lives, unwelcome rebrands are a little sting, a painful reminder of that frustrating feeling of powerlessness and smallness, the feeling that you don't matter and that there's nothing you can do. Of course, this is like the most first world problem to ever exist, and those of us who care about this kind of stuff are lucky that we are reminded of these feelings of powerlessness by something as insignificant and non-consequential as a rebranding. That being said, is there a solution to this very trivial unproblem of a problem? Well, in cases like these, when the fate of your beloved brand rests in the hands of out-of-touch corporations, so far removed from you and so irrelevant of your opinion, there's really nothing that you can do, except to try and enjoy the new design. I know that sometimes it's hard to let go of the old and welcome in a new change, especially if that change is an unwelcome and inferior downgrade. But over time, you get accustomed to the thing you once thought was so jarring, and you might find that you start to like it more and more. to the point where one day you take a look at the old logo and you think to yourself, hey, this looks a lot more outdated than I remember. Maybe the redesign was actually a good thing. And just as you start to love the new as much as the old, they decide to change it again! And the cycle starts from the beginning. But it's not all tears. Sometimes we need a taste of something bitter to really appreciate the sweet. As the saying goes, you don't appreciate it until it's gone. These less than ideal redesigns allow us to fully appreciate the good ones, to romanticize them, and to revel in their nostalgia.